Hey YouTube, what's going on? Snowflarky Zemos here today with my Aitsu deck. Now, Aitsu is one of the really old Union monsters from the early eras of Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's one of my favorite cards of all time. A lot of you have never seen this card. It's a 5-star 100 attack monster, which, it wasn't even in the first set, so when I saw it, I was kind of baffled by it, only to later find out that it comes with this blue guy, Koitsu, who equips to it as a Union monster, giving it 3,000 extra attack and letting it do piercing damage. I thought that kind of mechanic was cool, and I really like this like red kind of Gumby looking guy. So always a card that I have attached to as a fan favorite. So this is a just fun deck I put together that can actually get out Aitsu and trying to figure out any kind of synergies I can to help out Aitsu. And luckily, because he's a normal monster, that makes him a non-effect monster, so that means I can use the power of the Tenyi cards. And it just makes a, way to play Etsu in a fun and casual way. So with that, let's get into the cards. Starting off with the monsters, I am playing one copy of Etsu and one copy of its corresponding part Koitsu. Now I know the goal of the deck here is to summon Etsu and be able to use it, but Etsu and Koitsu are some of the biggest bricks ever in Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, Koitsu is like a 10-star monster with 200 attack, and Etsu is a 5-star monster. So, cards that mostly, if you see them in your hand, are dead, so we want to keep them in the deck, and we want to be pulling them out through other ways. Now, the good thing about Aitsu is that in Tenyis, you usually have your normal summon free, so you can use that to tribute summon Aitsu off of a special summon Tenyi if it gets stuck in your hand. Koitsu you never want to see in your hand, but if it's stuck in your hand, we can use the Shaman of the Tenyi as a discard outlet to get this in the grave, and that helps with Shaman's effect anyway. So, Aitsu, 5-star monster, 100 attack, normal monster, so going to be supported with our Tenyu monsters. And Koitsu is a Union monster that says once per turn during the main phase, if, this card is on the field, you can equip it to an Aitsu you control. If you do, it gains 3,000 attack, and when it attacks a defense position monster, it inflicts piercing damage. So it's pretty cool. You get Aitsu on the field, you get Koitsu on the field. We equip Koitsu to Aitsu now. Aitsu's got 3,000 attack and piercing, and that is pretty cool. So that's mainly how the two cards work. We want to get Aitsu on the field, and we want Koitsu to be on the field, but most likely we're just going to dump this in the graveyard and equip it with the rollout trap card. And that is the two guys of the Aitsu. You can also use Soitsu and Doitsu, who are like them, except they only Soitsu only gets 2,500 attack, and but he's not tribute summoned, so little plus. But I like Aitsu more. I like the OG too. Next up for the monsters, I am playing two copies of UFO Turtle. UFO Turtle, the classic battle recruiter. It's a 1400 attack 4-star monster, but when this card is destroyed by battle, you can special summon a fire monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck in face-up attack position. So we can play UFO Turtle, crash it into an opponent's monster, or set it face down, get a couple attacks, and use that to pull Aitsu out of the deck onto the field, since it only has 100 attack. If you already have Aitsu, though, there's another target we can pull out with UFO Turtle, and that is a copy of Tenyi Spirit Mapura, fire monster with 600 attack. So that's a good way to get that out of the deck, too. And also gives me an excuse to play this really nice secret rare UFO Turtle. So, it's a cool way to get it. Next, I am playing two copies of Screech. Screech is a water monster with 1500 attack that has a pretty powerful effect. If this card is destroyed by battle, send two water monsters from your deck to the graveyard. So Koitsu is a water monster, so we want this card to be destroyed by battle, so we can send Koitsu to the grave. Of course, with that, we can send the other copy of Screech to the grave if it's destroyed, or we can send a copy of Tenyi Spirit Shitana, which is a water monster, and definitely one we want in the graveyard for its effect. So another pretty good monster to have. We want to get Koitsu in the grave. We can summon this and run it into an opponent's monster, or just set it and let them attack into it. And either way, not that bad because it's Tenyis, and we can spend our normal summon on something like that without much worry. Next, we're going to get into the Tenyi cards that help support this deck. We are playing three copies of Tenyi Spirit Shitana. All Tenyis have an effect that if you control no effect monsters, you can special summon them from your hand. which is pretty sweet. That gives you free summons that you contribute for Aitsu if it's dead in your hand. In addition to this card being a water, which is good for Screech, it also has one of the better Tenyi effects. You can banish this card from your hand or graveyard when a non-effect monster, which includes normal monsters, is destroyed. You banish it from your hand or graveyard to target one of those destroyed monsters, special summon it, and then if you do, destroy a monster on your field. So if you got Aitsu on the field and he's sitting on the field and you don't have Koitsu yet to make him really strong, and he gets destroyed, well, you can banish Tenyi Spirit Shatana, summon Aitsu right back, and destroy a monster, which is pretty cool. So yeah, definitely want to see 3 Shatana because it's one of the best. Next, I'm playing 3 copies of Tenyi Spirit Vishuddha. This is the 7-star 1500. It's a Tenyi effect is that if you control a non-effect monster, you may banish this card from your hand or graveyard, target a card on the field, and return it to the hand. So that's pretty cool. Non-destruction removal. It does target, which means it can't remove everything, but it can do a lot of things, and it's just a good card to have. Next up, I'm running 3 copies of Tenyi Spirit Ashina. Tenyi Spirit Ashina is another one of the big ones with 1600 attack. Its Tenyi effect here is that if we control a non-effect monster, we can banish this card from our hand or grave to special summon a Tenyi monster from the deck, except Tenyi Spirit Ashana, of course. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn except worm monsters. So do note that if you're going to look to special summon Koitsu some way or special summon Aitsu off of UFO Turtle, you can't do so if you've played Ashina, so you just have to keep that in mind. But this card's too good to pass up because it extends our plays, gets more cards out of the deck, and we want to get as many of the Tenyis out of the deck as possible because we need them to help out our Aitsu. Next up, 2 copies of Tenyi Spirit Nahata. This is the Battle Trick. It's got the effect that if a non-effect monster battles, you can banish this card from your hand or graveyard to make the monster it's battling lose 1500 attack. So that's pretty cool. Add that on top of Aitsu's already strong 3100, and you know, you can do a lot of damage by battling a monster, even if it's not in defense. Next, we got the 1 copy of Tenyi Spirit Mapora. This is the one that if a non-effect monster is targeted by a card effect, you can banish it from your hand or graveyard to negate the activation of the card and destroy it. So a 1-time protection from targeting removal, pretty good. Next, we're playing 2 copies of Tenyi Spirit Adhara. This is our 1-star tuner that we're not going to make too much use of that tuner, but its Tenyi Spirit effect is that if you control a non-effect monster, you can banish this card from your hand or graveyard to take one of your banished Tenyis and add it back to your hand. So if there's one that we want to have access to again, we just add whichever one we're looking for and put it back in our hand. And last for the monsters, I'm playing 1 copy of Mare Mare, a really good card for Tenyis. It's a really big monster. It's got 7 stars with 2100 attack, but it has this great effect that up to thrice per turn, you can reduce this card's level by 1 and summon a worm token that is a level 1 monster, and you can do that up to thrice per turn. So basically, this card is a 1 card Link 4, and Tenyi's got a really good Link 4 that we can make off of it, so we want to play it. Additionally, it is a water monster that we can send off of Screech, so keep that in mind. Pretty good, you know, card to send off of Screech. And that is it for the monsters. Next, we're going to go into our spell cards. I am playing 2 copies of Flawless Perfection of the Tenyi. Flawless Perfection of the Tenyi is the Tenyi field spell. It makes all non-effect monsters on the field unaffected by monster effects, so that's pretty nice for Etsu. And of course, if you control, if your opponent special summons an effect monster while you control a face down or non-effect monster, like Etsu, you can draw 2 cards, so that's pretty cool. Both of those are awesome effects. Big fan of this card. And so we're also playing a Terraforming to Search It. You know, it just adds a field spell from the deck to the hand. Next up, I am playing 3 copies of Vessel for the Dragon Cycle. Really good spell that keeps the Tenyi cards moving. You can send a worm monster from your deck to the graveyard, and then if this card, if you control a face-up non-effect monster, you can add from your deck to your hand 1 Tenyi monster with a different name than the card you sent to the graveyard. So this card is a really good way to, with that first effect, get Mare Mare into the grave, and then you add whatever Tenyi you want. If you have Mare Mare in the grave, you just send another Tenyi to the grave. you know, plenty of cards, so it gets you access to your Tenyis, so you use that to get whatever Tenyis you want access to in your hand and in your grave. You can only use one of that card per turn. Perfectly fine. Next up, I'm playing 3 copies of Heavenly Dragon Cycle. This is a Tenyi quick play spell that says you contribute a worm monster to add a worm monster from your deck to your hand. So if you special summon to Tenyi, you can basically just tribute it off to get yourself access to another Tenyi that you can probably special summon, get some out of the deck. Of course, if you tributed a non-effect monster to activate this card, you can special summon it instead, but negate its effects. I don't find that effect in too useful, but you know, it comes in handy. And then additionally, this card has another great effect. During your main phase, if you control a face-up non-effect monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard to add a Tenyi card from your deck to your hand, and you can only use one Heavenly Dragon Cycle effect per turn and only once that turn. So if this card's in your graveyard on the turn after you've played it, you know, you can banish it, add a Tenyi card, any of the monsters, the field spell, the trap card, anything we're looking for, and we are happy to be doing that. Next up, I'm playing 1 copy of Creature Swap. Both UFO Turtle and Screech are good cards to Creature Swap to the opponent, because if you Creature Swap them to your opponent, you can get probably one of their better monsters on the field, especially if you use cards like Vishuda or whatnot to bounce ones that you don't want them to give you. And when you attack and destroy them by battle, they'll go to your graveyard and still trigger their effects, whether UFO Turtle summoning Aitsu from the deck, or whether Screech is going to dump a bunch of cards. And since Creature Swap is one of my favorite cards, it's a good card to bait negation as well. You know, I figure running one of is perfectly fine with those 4 good targets. Next up, I'm playing 2 copies of Raigeki. This is just to clear opponents' boards, take care of some annoying things. Tenyis can summon a lot of monsters, so if you can clear monsters, you can OTK pretty easily. And so, glad to wipe out monsters and do that. Raigeki's spell card that destroys all monsters our opponent controls. Also a good card for baiting out negates, because if they don't negate it, well, they're going to lose some stuff, and then maybe you can go off on your Tenyi combo. Next up, I'm playing a copy of Monster Reborn. Pretty good card for just pulling out any Tenyi cards, especially if you've already summoned like the big link and got removed and you want it back. Or if you had to get out Aitsu earlier and then it's stuck in your graveyard because you didn't have Shitana online, and then you get the ability to equip it with Koitsu, well, we can pull Monster Reborn and just summon it from the grave. And of course, the fact that Monster Reborn also allows you to pick a target from your opponent's grave is also good. And then last for the spells, I'm playing 1 copy of Foolish Burial. Use this to send Mare Mare or Koitsu or just whatever we're looking to get into the graveyard. You know, nothing wrong with that. Lots of good graveyard effects. So we have good graveyard access. So a card that simply just puts a card in there for us is pretty good. And that is it for the spell cards. Next, we're going to take a look at traps. The main trap we are playing is 3 copies of Rollout. This is a really cool card, really helpful for this. We can select a Union monster in our graveyard and equip it to an appropriate monster on our side of the field. So this is the main reason we want to dump Koitsu into the grave, because if we have Koitsu on the grave, as soon as we get Aitsu on the field, we can flip up, roll out, and immediately take our Koitsu from the grave and equip it to Aitsu, making it the 3000 attack piercing vanilla that it was always destined to be. Mostly just playing 3 copies of this because I want to see it, and of course if Aitsu gets removed by card effect, you know, and you Tenyi Spirit Shitana to bring it back, well, Koitsu's not coming back with it, so we're going to have another rollout so that we can equip Koitsu back to it. Pretty cool card. One of my good card for Union stuff. There's not too much just generic Union support, so always glad to have that card in the arsenal. And then 2 copies of Fists of the Unrivaled Tenyi. It's a counter trap that says when a spell, a trap, or a monster effect is activated while you control a face-up non-effect monster, negate the effect. And then, of course, if this face-down card is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon a non-effect monster from your extra deck. So there's lots of big monsters we can pull out with that, and a counter trap for controlling non-effect monsters like the Tenyi Lynx or Aitsu is something that is very welcome. And this card can be searched with Heavenly Dragon Cycles effect, which is awesome. And that is it for the main deck. Alright, going into the extra deck, I am playing 3 copies of Monk of the Tenyi. This is the Tenyi Link 1 monster, very important for getting things started. It requires a non-Link Tenyi monster, and it's simply an 1000 attack monster that is a non-effect monster, which is very important for your combos. Next up, I'm playing 3 copies of Shaman of the Tenyi. Really good Link 2 for Tenyis. It requires 2 worm monsters, and it has an effect where you can discard a card to target a worm monster from your graveyard and special summon it. This is our main way of getting Mare Mare onto the field so that we can use all of its tokens to further link climb. And its discard outlet is a good way to get rid of a dead Koitsu in the hand. Both good benefits. And if you do that effect to special summon a worm monster, you cannot activate the effects of monsters special summoned from the extra deck except Tenyi monsters for the rest of this turn, and that's not a big deal. Most of what we're going into is Tenyi monsters anyway. Few cases where that might interfere, but just keep that in mind. When an attack is declared involving a face-up non-effect monster, like Aitsu, you can target a card your opponent controls and destroy it. So pretty sweet, and it's really easy to run through all 3 of these because you, with only 1600 attack, it's a pretty easy card to remove, but you just make another one on the following turn and summon a card again, especially if you've already made the big Link 4, you can just pull it right from the grave with that effect, which is nice. We're going to talk about him next. It's Tenyi Spirit Sasahara. This is a Link 4 monster that requires 2+ worm monsters. Mare Mare and the 3 tokens that can be generated off of this effect can make this card, so 1 card can just make it, and that's pretty sweet. It's a 3000 attack monster that says while you control a face-up non-effect monster, your opponent cannot target for attacks or card effects affect monsters you control. So if you have this guy with a non-effect monster on the field, you can use it to protect your Shaman of the Tenyi, which is pretty sweet. And then, of course, a quick effect. You can target an effect monster your opponent controls and special summon a Tenyi Spirit token, a Worm Light level 4 token. And it's got 0 defense, but its attack becomes whatever the monster you targeted's original attack is. So that's pretty cool. Gets you lots of materials on board to further summon extra deck monsters. Maybe tribute fodder for an Aitsu or a Koitsu in the hand if you do it over 2 turns. And of course, the tokens are non-effect monsters that will be able to protect your effect monsters that you are playing. Next up, I'm playing 1 copy of Berserker the Tenyi. This is a Link 3 non-effect monster that requires 2+ monsters, including a Link monster, so normally you need a Monk or Shaman of the Tenyi to go into it. But it just gives you a 3000 attack non-effect monster, so a bigger non-effect monster to use with all the Tenyi effects, which is something that's welcome to have. Next up, I'm playing a copy of Gaia's Saber, the Lightning Shadow. It's also a non-effect, Link 3. It's got 2600 attack. Mostly the reason why it's in here is if I needed to make a bigger non-effect monster, but I couldn't, I don't really have the Link monster to go into Berserker. Well, I can just go into Gaia's Saber, which is only 400 less attack. Next up, I'm playing 1 copy of Draco Masters of the Tenyi. It requires 2+ monsters, including a Link monster, 2600 attack. It cannot be destroyed by battle with an effect monster, which is pretty nice for just walling off. And then if you control no other effect monsters, you can destroy effect monsters your opponent controls up to the number of non-effect monsters you control and or in your graveyard. So, you can go into this before going into, say, a Berserker or, Sasahara, and you can wipe a bunch of cards, which is pretty cool. It's a good thing to have access to, for sure. Next, I'm playing 1 copy of Gemnite Pearl. This is a rank 4 non-effect monster with 2600 attack, but this can be made because a lot of the Tenyis, like Nahata, Mapura, and Shitana, are all level 4, so 2 of those can go into Gemnite Pearl. And of course, a UFO Turtle or Screech and 1 Tenyi can also go into Gemnite Pearl, and it just gives you access to a sizable non-effect monster that has more attack, but also allows you to continue using your Tenyi effects. Next, I'm playing a copy of Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. This is a 4500 attack monster that is a non-effect monster, so this is in here mainly because if our set Fist of the Unrivaled Tenyi is destroyed, then we can pull this card right out of the extra deck, and it's just the largest attack we can get on a non-effect monster. If you want to be funnier, you can play Master of Oz, which is a big green koala. It's got 300 less attack, but it's a big green koala, so it's very funny. Next up, to fill out the extra deck, just a couple rank 4s that I can go into an emergency situation. One is Baguska, the terribly tired Tapir. Essentially, with 2 level 4s, we summon Baguska in defense, and it becomes a 2-turn skill drain. All monsters are flipped to defense, and they cannot activate their effects. So if we need to buy some time, we can make into Baguska, draw 2 cards, etc. Um, Next up, we got a Tornado Dragon. This is a 2 level 4s and has the quick effect that we can destroy a spell or trap card on the field. So if there's a spell or trap card based decks, things we need to get rid of, we can go into Tornado Dragon. And then last, a Castel the Sky Blaster Musketeer. This is a rank 4 XZ that allows us to detach 2 materials and shuffle a face-up card on the field back into the deck, which is pretty nice non-destruction removal. It's also got a Book of Moon style effect for, except not quick play, for 1 material, but you barely ever use that. You're mostly using this to just shuffle a face-up card. So all things that can come up. Castel could be switched for Abyss Dweller if you're more worried about graveyard effects going off. Uh, Definitely something to keep in mind. So that is it for my Aitsu deck. Again, just a fun way to be able to play Aitsu with some cards that help. Tenyis are a great boost to tons of non-effect monsters, so if you like a lot of those ones from the old days, you think about grabbing some Tenyi cards and just playing something for fun with it. Hopefully one day Konami will give us true, good, generic Union support so that maybe I can do something a little more focused with it. But for now, this will do. Fun enough for a casual environment. Let me know what you think. Love to know if you're a big fan of the Etsu cards or maybe what your favorite Union monster in general is. Thanks for checking it out. I'll catch y'all in the next one.